let's roll the Aleppo boy video. We'll just roll that as B-roll, and me and Leanne will talk over it. Let's go to the Aleppo boy video. Now, this is a video that everyone remembers. Here he is, and look at this, folks. This is how they're set it up.
They're setting up the shot, and everyone remembers this iconic photo where he's there sitting sadly.
Oh, it made every news. This is why I pulled this clip, because it highlights how they set it up, how this kid's actions don't merit somebody that looks like they've just been bombed.
He sits in an empty, pristine, modern ambulance.
Now watch this. He's touching allegedly an open wound and not seeming to care.
Like, oh, what is this?
Yeah, oh, I have an open wound from an explosion, but it doesn't seem to hurt me much. And then, boom, every news agency.
Yeah, 400 newspapers, the exact same story. Assad and Russia kill children. They have to be stopped.
So there's one example of how this stuff works. Yeah, there's CNN. They're going to run with it all day, MSNBC. There's one example.
Hey, man, that one made me cry, too. That was a sad photo. That was a...
Of course, and who knows if, I think that's Kate Boldan, I think is her name on CNN.
Yeah, and it's a still picture only.
And who knows if she even knows what's going on.
Even though there's video of the boy, they only use that still.
She didn't
use the video footage on her television show that liked B-roll.
Oh, yeah, there it is again.
Photo.
There they put...
Move the boy's body.
So here's just another example of this. Now, we've actually got another example once this video comes to a close. Okay, now let's go to the fake car bomb attack.
And this one is like, you can't even...
We'll talk over this one, too. Go ahead and roll this one, guys.
This was in Iraq, and what year? I don't see it here. This is last year?
You know, I'm not sure. I think it was 2016, but I really am not sure.
So here the guy, he goes, he puts the...
Thank you. 2016, yes.
So he puts the bomb in the car, gets in the drive-away vehicle and
heads
off.
Yeah.
It's out of range. And then...
All right, so there's your suspected terrorist. This crowded area, and then watch what happens.
No one's there. Boom.
There goes the car bomb.
Car is explosions.
No one was there. No one was in the area, in the vicinity.
Okay, everyone, now it's time.
And now here we go. All right, everybody move in.
Everyone move in. Oh, we've injured.
He's down. He's down.
Oh, I've been hurt.
He's hurt. He's down. He's out.
I've been hurt.
Oh, the shrapnel.
Oh, my. Please help us.
And look at this guy. Oh, we need help. Bring in the ambulance.
Please send us weapons so that we can fight.
And wait a second.
This is what they're...
Hold up.
Send us weapons so we can fight against Assad.
That looks like the same van that pulled up with the white helmets, too, doesn't it? That's the exact same van.
Exactly. And that's the thing. It's like, oh, here. Oh, wait, this doesn't look realistic. Sit over here. You lay there. Okay.
Yeah, wait, we need to get a better picture of this.
And so this is the kind of stuff they can make these
Here,
videos,
run around. Yeah, jump up and down.
Tell the U.S. that we need to send them more weapons so that they can fight against whoever it is that they're, these CIA-backed groups want to get out. This isn't... Exactly. And I got that in my report coming up where we just talk about how this is something, again, with the Groundhog's Day. This is not a new tactic as far as creating war propaganda. It's wag the dog, been around forever. And then just with the invention of television or social media. I mean, because you could see something like this on YouTube, with this kind of grainy footage where you wouldn't see, obviously, the setup for it. You'd just see that particular image of the melee, and you'd think it was real. Mm-hmm. Because, well, how do they have the ability to create a fake stage with a fake
Yeah, it's impossible. It couldn't be.
How could they do it? They're just out in the desert.
Why would CNN run with that story?
Yeah, I mean, it sucks that we can't trust and feel, and that's what makes me so angry, is that they use us and they use these people and they lie to us so much that our first instinct at this, I mean, for me, isn't even to trust and to cry for these kids. It's to say, wow, what's the setup here? Who wants to take us to war now? It's like, oh, it makes me so angry that that's how much they lied to us. We can't trust anything or even have compassion for our fellow humans out there.
So let's actually go to Leanne's report from, what was that, a couple years ago, Leanne?
Yeah, I think 2013.
Before we go to that, though, folks, let's go to this video that Leanne shot a year ago or 2 years ago,
years back,
highlighting how false flags work, how the media spins it, and how you can tell in the future how to identify these things. Let's go to that report.
Following 2 propaganda-fueled days centered around fake photos supposedly proving that Russian troops were inside the Ukraine, the New York Times has issued a retraction. Buried deep on page A9, the newspaper admits the authenticity of the photos has come under scrutiny. The establishment media and the State Department pawned these photos off as evidence, despite the fact the authenticity of the photographs couldn't be independently verified. Freelance photographer Maxim Dondiuk, who worked for a Russian news magazine, told the New York Times he had taken the group photograph in Slavyansk and posted it on his Instagram account. He told the newspaper that nobody asked his permission to use the photograph. And this isn't the first time the war machine media have churned out false evidence in an effort to gear the country up for war. Last year, the BBC appeared to use stunning fakery in an effort to launch a war with Syria. This report was first released on August 29, 2013, just days before an attack on Syria seemed inevitable. The BBC claims it just so happened to be filming at a small hospital when victims of a napalm-style attack poured into that very spot.
Among the medics here was a British doctor visiting for the charity Hand in Hand.
I need a pause because it's just absolute chaos and carnage here. We've had a massive influx of what looks like serious burns. It seems like it must be some sort of, I'm not really sure, maybe napalm, something similar to that.
Exactly 1 month later, Obama and crew were trying to pin the chemical weapons attack on Assad without success. So BBC airs the exact same clip, this time artificially dubbing the doctor's voice to suit the establishment's need for the chemical weapons tagline.
We've had a massive influx of what looks like serious burns. It seems like it must be some sort of chemical weapon. I'm not really sure.
In a subsequent BBC interview, Dr. Rola Halam complained about the UK Parliament's refusal to authorize a military strike on Syria. Interestingly, Halam's father is also on the Syrian National Council, the political body which represents opposition militants. And if this all seems familiar, well, it should. A similar disinfo tactic was used to bolster support for the war with Iraq.
They took the babies out of the incubators. Took the incubators and left the children to die on a cold floor.
That was Nurse Nayera, whose tearful testimony swung the pendulum in favor of war. After the vote was safely passed, Nayera, the daughter of the Kuwaiti ambassador to Washington, admitted to making the whole story up. Nurse Nayera and those faulty claims of weapons of mass destruction weren't the only lies told to convince America a war with Iraq was necessary. CNN also did their part to play up the drama.
CNN's Carl Rochelle is here with me. Just came up. Carl, I know we can't be very specific given these restrictions, but within those parameters, what did you see?
Well, what I saw, I didn't see anything hit. I looked almost straight above us. There's a vapor trail coming from my right to my left, and there's a cloud of something. It looks like it might have been an explosion, a cloud. I'd say...
Oh, I love this country so much.
These false flag mass media war campaigns are so typical, in fact, there's even a movie about it.
Okay, good. Put the village behind her.
Give me some flames, some sound of screaming.
That's good. We can link that to the press. They can downlink it on Telstar 401 Transporter 21.
And this just in, a Newsbreak special report from the Albanian front. We've just received information that the young Albanian national fleeing in this video is attempting to escape terrorist reprisals in her village.
Even before television was invented, mainstream media was still lined to go to war. In 1895, William Randolph Hearst of the New York Journal sent his employees to cover the Cuban revolt against Spain. Lacking anything newsworthy to report, Hearst told his employee, famed illustrator Frederick Remington, "You furnish the pictures, and I'll furnish the war." The establishment media continues to serve as the propaganda arm of the war machine. It is their job to file dubious reports as part of a campaign to build public consensus for ongoing interventions, from Iraq and Libya to Syria and eventually Ukraine.
Boy, did I almost look stupid.
Of a whole new season. police say 3 murder victims in Fresno, California today were also chosen at random.
Muhammad surrendered to police, yelling "God is good" in Arabic.
He yelled out Ali Akbar as he was seated in the back seat of the patrol car,
shaking the city of Fresno to its core.
Too much things are going on in this city, not only this, around the whole world, all this violence.
As the area is secured, Parisians, many now accustomed to these emergencies, ordered to keep their...
Police and troops are on alert all over France after another act of terror in Paris. A gunman who was allegedly known as a threat to police.
A Parisian landmark turned into a crime scene. The Champs-Élysées is one of the busiest parts of town.
What can you say? It just never ends.
Just 2 days ago, 2 men were arrested in Marseille, France, suspected of planning an attack to disrupt the election.
The showdown with North Korea. The rogue state is turning up the temperature yet again.
The young leader of an impoverished nation has an appetite for grandiose propaganda.
South Korea has come so far, is so dramatically stronger, better, more prosperous, freer. You'd hate to see anything happen that would disrupt that development. So I think this is a very serious time.
Venezuela is at a breaking point. Thousands taking to the streets yet again today after weeks of violent protests in the capital city of Caracas.
As a cloud of uncertainty hangs over the future of the South American country.
There were other 5 victims. So again, it seems like not only is the sort of tension escalating.
The world, it seems, is quickly moving toward a point of no return.
Some of the worst fighting to grip Libya has played out in recent months as seesaw battles rage between rival militia and the military.
Now, some of these trends have existed throughout church history, but in the end times, they have a distinct intensity. That's the point. They make global headlines in a way they never did before. They constitute a sign, meaning some theologians look at these and they go, well, they've always been there. There's no sign in just the general trends of history. This is talking about a heightened level that's distinct.
Madam President, today a perfect storm has engulfed the Middle East and continues to threaten international peace and security. Millions have been displaced in the biggest refugee crisis since the Second World War. In many countries, societies have fractured along ethnic or religious lines.
Men and women, it seems like every day there is something in the news that reminds us of the perilous times in which we live.
The American flag is under attack on a college campus yet again, this time at UC Davis, where its student senate voted to remove the flag from its meetings.
Cabot Phillips, what the heck is going on?
We've got patriotism triggering people now. And look, this may be shocking to many of our viewers at home, but for anyone that has stepped foot on a college campus in the past few years, they know this is the environment we have now where students are coddled and almost encouraged to be offended by everything, in this case, the American flag.
Verse 10, he goes, it's going to go beyond that. Hatred towards one another, believer, unrelated to faith. Hatred in the culture is going to be common at a level beyond what it is now. We can see it increasing. Never in my 40 years of ministry have I seen the social context in which people are so easily offended. And so, so sensitive and preoccupied with their honor and how they're treated and all these things. Just powder kegs are just everywhere. Just a phrase will set off a riot in a university or a city or a college or a nation, because there's this incredible shift of the emotional climate in society. It's going to get far more intense.
But critics fear this is becoming an anti-American trend among universities.
And look, this isn't isolated. If this was one isolated incident, you could chalk it up to a few crazy college students. But we reported across the country at Leadership Institute's Campus Reform on all this craziness.
In what world do people think it's okay for teachers to discuss transgenderism with a bunch of 5-year-olds? Maybe, just maybe, they ought to stick to teaching the kids how to read and write instead of deconstructing their God-given gender identity. And whatever happened to reading an old-fashioned nursery rhyme? Back when I was in school, Jack and Jill went up the hill, but today, when Jack came down, he was wearing Jill's dress and going by the name Jackie.
Well,
They are calling it the worst thing any contestant has ever done in 34 seasons of their reality show Survivor. Fans around the world are outraged over the tactics of contestant Jeff Varner during a tribal council when he outed fellow contestant Zeke Smith as transgender.
Deception is dressed up in a happy countenance and positive messaging. The presentation of deception is very, very positive most times. I mean, there's a few exceptions. Deception is the most dangerous of all of the negative trends because we're unaware of it. It's right next to us, and it's positive, and it's happy, and it's affirming, and yes, it feels good. Boom, we gotcha. That's what the enemy would say. Jesus said this is number one.
Thanks for having me.
This is one of the most profound changes, I think, in the history of the West, the redefinition of sex from a biological reality to a social construct, and it's had a lot of implications.
But starting at the end of the month, some women's, men's, and even gender-neutral restrooms at UW-Madison will have free tampons. And the students I talked to tonight didn't even flinch when I asked them about putting these in men's restrooms.
Is the idea that sex is purely a social construct and not a biological reality, is that rooted in science?
No, this is what was really stunning to me, was to see how, we have science thrown in our faces all day long. And, your sex is literally established from the moment of conception. That is a very basic biological medical reality. And if you read, say, medical textbooks, they're going to talk about your sex in very plain scientific terms. And society is going in a completely different direction.
There's a passage that's been on my heart the last couple of months. It's 2 Timothy 3, in talking about this world that we live in right now. But it's an interesting passage because he starts off, Paul tells Timothy, understand this.
But it'll start, know this. Paul said, this is need to know information. This isn't just kind of like casual information.
And then he says this in verse 2, for people will be lovers of self.
It's not for nothing that Webster's officially added the word selfie to the dictionary this year.
Why? Perhaps because narcissism has become completely intertwined with the fabric of our society.
Oxford estimates use of the word in the past year has increased 17,000%.
The crazy thing about this list is many of these things we read, and nowadays we just kind of shrug our shoulders at it.
The current version of the DSM defines narcissism as intense self-absorption and a grandiose sense of self.
Sounds familiar.
Because the emotional dynamics of billions of people is going to shift to an increase of evil and selfishness. So he's talking about the emotional dynamics of the planet.
I grew up in something often called Generation Me, but when I look at the current world, I can't remember why that fit us. This is Generation Me, or maybe Generation Look at Me.
And it's become so normal to us. I mean, I was reading this thing about the sociologists are saying that our culture, this generation, is by far, by a long shot, the most narcissistic culture to ever exist.
It seems that has become part of the zeitgeist. The idea that everyone deserves a camera crew or a microphone to broadcast everything about them.
Everyone thinking, I have the opinion that's going to change. We think that's normal.
We have Twitter, Facebook, MySpace, Foursquare, and myriad blogging tools that are built to allow us to tell the world everything we're thinking, as if every thought we have should be shared.
You understand, back then they'd be like, you gotta be kidding me. Everyone is gonna think that their voice should be heard, and everyone is gonna build this shrine to themselves so that everyone else can see and make themselves look as good as possible. It's normal.
That's what Paul is describing here.
What do you want to believe? What's your pleasure? What would you like? I'll find you a teacher to give you that. But Paul tells Timothy, don't you be one of those guys. You know what this book says. You preach it. You lay it out there. Now's the time to stay the course. Now this time is to stay strong, because the time's coming. People are going to be lovers of themselves, lovers of pleasure, not lovers of God.
How about this?
I go over there, punch him in the head, and come right back.
Carrie, no!
Like Tom Cruise and other celebrity Scientologists, Remini vocally supported the church to a religion that demanded much of your time, your money, and your mind.
It is our responsibility to be Scientologists, no matter where we live or work, no matter our resources or excuses.
Well, what you would be told is that you're working to be your better self in all areas of your life.
Yes, we live in turbulent times, but actually we also live in amazing times. And this may sound a little odd when you switch on the evening news at the moment. You do sometimes have to wonder whether you're watching a Hollywood B movie or actually watching reality unfold.
What appears to be an attack on French.
So, clearly the global in-tray is very disruptive. It is creating uncertainty. It is also signaling a degree of complexity that in some ways is unprecedented. And if you just take the most brutal news item of the last week, that we have the United Nations declaring 4 concurrent droughts. First of all, there hasn't been one declared in over 20 years, and now we have 4 concurrent droughts.
You know, the world's getting crazy. Who knows what's going to happen next? You just see it happening. The writing's on the wall. Every month seems like just something new.
In the midst of a world that was actually beginning to lose a sense of collective interest, why is it that nations agreed for the first time on a shared agenda for development? This has never existed before.
The resolutions on sustaining peace and the 2030 agenda are calls for hope.
Put them with all the political signs that we haven't looked at, all the other globalization signs, you put them all together and say, what hour of history are we living at? Jesus says it over and over, watch. Look here in Mark 13. It says it 3 times in one passage. Daniel 11:33, the people of understanding, or the wise, use whichever term you want, they're called by this angel the people who understand what's going on. Meaning right now today, many in the nations, as things are heating up, they're pretty confused what's going on.
Where he goes, Timothy, there's going to be a time when no one puts up with this but you. As for you, let them go. They're going to go and they're going to just find a teacher to tell them what they want to hear. Why? Because they're a lover of pleasure. They don't believe there's a judgment. Man, half the people in the church don't even believe a judgment's coming. Which I just go, man, did you ever read this? Like you go, well, I don't believe a loving God could judge. I go, get to page 2. You're just quoting Old Testament. Yeah, because he mellows out in Revelation. What they're unwilling to do is preach truth. See, it used to be that there was a lot of preaching of the gospel, and yet it seemed like, why don't you care for the poor? Why don't you care for the needs of the earth? And it wasn't a popular thing, but now it's very popular to go care for the needs of the world. You're never going to get attacked for drilling wells overseas, but you'll get attacked for preaching the morality in this book. You'll get attacked by saying there's only one way to heaven, it's through Jesus Christ. And you'll get attacked for saying that there's a narrow road and few will find it, and yet there's a wide, easy road that leads to destruction. And so a lot of times we'll run to the things that are popular. But where are we?
Trouble. They are trying to silence you. A monstrous and pervasive movement is putting the First Amendment and your free speech, the most basic and fundamental tenets of our nation, at risk and in danger of extinction. And whether you're on the left or the right, free speech is essential to our democracy. The reason the country was founded, the reason people risk so much, even die to come here. Yet, as you sit there, you are watching a silencing in real time, where people are not allowed to express their opinion if it does not align with the thinking of others. Now, this is not an esoteric or an academic discussion about one person or one campus. It's happening all over, and it's putting us on a course where we are in danger of becoming a fascist, totalitarian society where there is only one accepted point of view. No other will be tolerated, and it's time to fight back.
On the Berkeley campus, opposition to Ann Coulter's appearance adds to a growing impression that conservative opinions are not welcome at many of the nation's public universities.
I was the one that personally invited Ann Coulter.
Naweed Tomas is spokesman for the Berkeley College Republicans.
These students are trying to create a liberal echo chamber on campus where one viewpoint's allowed and any other viewpoint is attacked and harassed.
Violence erupted on the Berkeley campus in February when outspoken conservative Milo Yiannopoulos was scheduled to appear. He was rushed from the building for what campus police said was his own safety. Berkeley officials worry the same thing could happen to Ann Coulter. Berkeley Chancellor Nicholas Dirks.
Our police department has made it clear that they have very specific intelligence regarding threats that could pose a grave danger to the speaker, attendees, and those who may wish to lawfully protest this event.
Demonstrations against conservative speakers have turned violent on campuses from NYU to the University of Washington in Seattle, where one man was shot in a clash between protesters. Berkeley officials blame recent violence there on what they call the Black Bloc, not students, but outsiders who come to campus bent on destruction.
Clad in black, wearing masks, highly organized, rather disciplined, armed, not with firearms, but armed with a number of weapons.
They call themselves climate realists. They reject the idea that man-made greenhouse gas emissions threatens the climate.
Scientists may worry about melting polar ice, rising seas, or strengthening storms, but to Joe Bast, all of what others call warning signs of climate change are just the natural order of things.
Is it fair to call you climate change deniers?
We are climate realists. The efforts to stop global warming or slow it down are way disproportional to what the science suggests would be necessary.
From this office park near Chicago, Bast runs the Heartland Institute, a conservative think tank waging what he insists is a nonpartisan information war.
But if you look at the opinion polls, I think the American public are on our side. They say, okay, maybe climate is changing, maybe there's a human impact. We probably can't do anything about it. It's really expensive. We think we've wasted too much money on this already.
Besides, he says, climate change isn't necessarily a bad thing.
Cold weather kills more people than warm weather does. So on net, more people would benefit in a warmer climate.
Most climate scientists, the United Nations, as well as NASA, dismiss these arguments as propaganda for fossil fuels. But Bast, who is not a scientist, can count on a very powerful ally now.
So Obama's talking about all of this with the global warming and that, and a lot of it's a hoax. It's a hoax.
Climate change, he says, is a naturally occurring cyclical phenomenon caused mostly by the sun, not an approaching disaster accelerated by carbon dioxide emissions caused by humans.
There is still much to learn about
the Institute is now sending that message in books and videos to 300,000 public school teachers and college professors. And despite a tepid reaction to the mailings, Bast believes the tide has turned.
Are you winning? We're winning big time. 10 years from now, nobody's going to be talking about global warming. It's going to be a bad memory.
And not a nightmare.
Hey, bud. You do that to me and I'll knock you flat.
This video recorded by a passenger in the moments just after an intense confrontation between a mother traveling with 2 young children and an American Airlines flight attendant.
You can't get silent with baby. Just give me that face stroller, please.
Witnesses say the flight attendant nearly struck one of the children as he was trying to remove the stroller from the overhead bin.
I was very upset and grabbed it and just pulled it and yanked it off, sort of violently yanked it.
and stormed off the plane with it.
Within moments, Tony Fierro, a fellow passenger, stands up to demand answers from the cabin crew.
What's the guy's name that did that with the stroller?
When the flight attendant returned, he and Fierro immediately clash.
Hey, bud, you do that to me and I'll knock you flat.
You stay out of this. Come on, come on, bring it up. You don't know what the story is.
I don't care what the story is. No one's hurt a baby. A baby almost got hurt. That's what just fired me up.
American Airlines says the crew member was immediately removed from duty, adding, "We are deeply sorry for the pain we have caused this passenger and her family. The actions of our team member captured here do not appear to reflect patience or empathy, two values necessary for customer care." The onboard outrage comes just 2 weeks after United Airlines publicly apologized for this video of a passenger bloodied as he was forcibly removed from a flight.
Shot an officer, he shot two officers. We have him cornered. He does have access to possible other parts of the building. So we're in a holding pattern right now.
Chaos in the downtown streets of Seattle tonight.
A desperate and frightening and intense situation.
2 police officers shot. It all started as a busted 7-Eleven robbery, then a foot chase through the streets, and hand-to-hand combat. It all ended with shots fired.
This is still an active crime scene.
One of the police officers hit in the face by a bullet. The other shot, but the vest stopped the bullet. Both recovering in the hospital tonight. Civilians in the area told to shelter in place as the battle played out in the street.
Back now with a heart-stopping moment caught on camera. A young child tumbling from the back of a church bus right onto a highway. What happens next may have saved her life.
Dramatic moments playing out on this highway in Arkansas. Keep your eye on that white church bus ahead. Out of nowhere, the back door swings open. Clinging on for dear life is a 4-year-old girl. Seconds later, the girl falls to the ground. Unaware of what just happened, the bus driver keeps on down the road. Witnesses say it would be 15 minutes before the bus returned. The little girl now motionless in the middle of a state highway.
I saw it happening and it blew my mind. It was kind of like I wasn't even seeing what I was seeing. You know, it looked like it was a movie.
Ryan Ciampoli, a certified EMT and volunteer firefighter, happened to be driving behind the bus, his dash cam rolling. That's him there rushing to the little girl, cradling her in his arms. Moments later, the 4-year-old regains consciousness.
I couldn't leave her just laying there.
He carefully lifts her up while his girlfriend is on the phone with 911.
Once the adrenaline and the shock kicked in her little body, she started kicking and screaming and, you know, where's my mommy and things like that. So stuff like that's really heartbreaking.
Whenever a case can be made, we will seek to put some people in jail.
Federal prosecutors are assessing whether to file charges related to the release of stolen U.S. information by the anti-secrecy organization WikiLeaks.
We are going to step up our effort and already are stepping up our efforts on all leaks.
Led by Julian Assange, WikiLeaks has published classified information, including nearly 750,000 sensitive documents from Chelsea Manning. In September of 2011, Assange shared his mission with 60 Minutes.
If you're a whistleblower and you have material that is important, we will accept it, we will defend you, and we will publish it.
Last year, the organization came under fire for publishing thousands of emails from the campaign of Democratic presidential nominee Hillary Clinton.
WikiLeaks! I love WikiLeaks!
The Justice Department inquiry comes as the CIA and the FBI are looking for an insider, either a CIA employee or contractor, who exposed top-secret government documents and hacking tools. Sources familiar with the investigation say it was someone who had physical access to the material. From his Ecuadorian embassy's safe house in London, Assange said the 8,000 stolen CIA documents were being passed around before WikiLeaks published the trove last month. CIA Director Mike Pompeo says Assange is a national security threat.
As long as they make a splash, they care nothing about the lives they put at risk or the damage they cause.
Despite security concerns and criticism from his most conservative of followers, Pope Francis is preparing for his visit to Egypt. Catholics make up less than 1% of the population, but Pope Francis wants to strengthen dialogue between religions. He will meet with the Grand Imam of the world's most influential centre of Sunni Islamic teaching, as well as the head of the Coptic Orthodox Church. Speaking ahead of his visit, he said,
Auspico che sia anche un valido contributo al dialogo interreligioso.
I hope it may offer a valid contribution to interreligious dialogue with the Islamic world and to ecumenical dialogue with the venerated and beloved Coptic Orthodox Church.
Il nostro mondo dilaniato dalla
Our world,
violenza
torn by
cieca,
blind violence, which has also afflicted the heart of your dear land, needs peace, love
ha
and
bisogno
mercy.
di pace, di amore e di misericordia.
The Vatican says the Pope is convinced that Christian-Muslim dialogue is more important than ever. However, the Pope's view is not shared by all Catholics. After a string of terrorist attacks on the country's Christians, some conservatives want no dialogue at all with Islam. During his 27 hours in Cairo, the Holy Father is meeting President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, which raised eyebrows among human rights activists. Asked if the Pope would question the president over the country's human rights record, the Vatican said that Pope Francis has made trips more delicate than this one. Security remains a priority, with the visit coming less than 3 weeks after dozens were killed in attacks against churches in Alexandria and Tanta, claimed by the Islamic State. Despite his vulnerability, Pope Francis has refused to appear in an armoured vehicle and will instead use a closed car so he can be closer to the people.
Pope Francis gave the very first papal TED Talk on Tuesday, and he had an important message for people in positions of power around the world.
E ti porta a fare del male a te stesso e agli altri, se non lo metti insieme all'umiltà e alla tenerezza.
During his speech, the Pope also emphasized that we all need each other, and the only way to build the future is to stand together. The Pope's talk was a surprise addition to the TED 2017 conference lineup, which included tennis star Serena Williams, World Bank President Jim Yong Kim, and journalist Gayle King. And it apparently took some convincing to get him to speak. The international curator who organized the Pope's talk told the Washington Post it took more than a year of asking and several trips to Rome to seal the deal.
Paying with cash could be a thing of the past. A study showed Wednesday that more than a third of Europeans and Americans would be happy to go without cash and rely on electronic forms of payment if they could, and at least 20% already do. The survey by ING bank website Easonomics was conducted across Europe, the US and Australia. A significant 34% of respondents in Europe and 38% in the US said they'd be willing to go cash-free permanently.
There tended to be more of a bent towards accepting cashless transactions amongst the countries for lower income levels. Romania, Turkey, for example, and to a degree Poland.
And cash is already getting less popular. More than half of the European respondents said they'd used less cash in the past 12 months than previously, and 78% said they expected to use it even less over the coming 12 months.
United States President Donald Trump is now talking about making his first official visit to the Jewish state this coming May. The discussions come through alleged plans to extend his European tour, and his Israel visit would be scheduled to coincide with Jerusalem reunification celebrations. If Trump does indeed arrive around May 21st or the following days as planned, however, it would also be the perfect moment to discuss his campaign promise to move the United States Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem and officially recognize the Holy City as the undivided capital of the Jewish state. Congress passed a motion to officially move the embassy back in 1995, but every president since then has signed executive orders every 6 months to postpone the move. Trump, unlike his predecessors, didn't only speak about the move either, though. His appointed ambassador to Israel, David Friedman, is also a pro-settlement, pro-embassy move supporter. After speaking with Palestinian officials, however, the planned move seemed to have stalled. Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas said that making such a move would, quote, destroy the prospects of any political process and would open the gates of hell in the region and in the whole world, end quote.
large explosion has been reported near the airport in Syria's capital, Damascus. Activists have posted a video that they say shows what happened. The cause of the explosion isn't yet known, and there are conflicting reports as to whether it was an Israeli airstrike or an attack by rebels.
What we have heard is that in the early hours of the morning, there were five attacks, and they jolted residents across Damascus awake. They were very large. We can see on Iranian-based press TV actual footage of fires in the night. It was at the airport, at what is being described as a military arms supply depot that is used by Iranians to bring in weapons and to take out weapons. So commercial and military planes leave from there with weapons for Iran, for Hezbollah, and also, of course, within Syria itself.
So assuming it was Israel that carried out these strikes, perhaps it's not surprising?
Yes, officially Israel doesn't confirm or deny, and when we ring the Israeli Defense Force spokesperson, that's what they say. But we have had uncharacteristically a response from the Israeli intelligence minister this morning, who says this would be consistent with Israel's aims of not allowing Hezbollah to have weapons on Israel's border. And we heard that also from Israel's defense minister today, who's in Moscow, and he said something, the same kind of statement to reporters there. So Israel almost stepping up to say that it will not allow its enemy Hezbollah, the ally of Iran and of Syria, to have weapons on the border. And if it sees those weapons, it will attack them.
North Korea is sure acting like they're ready for war. They fired hundreds of rockets and torpedoes at mock warships on Tuesday, its largest live-fire artillery drill ever. When it comes to North Korea, these things tend to land on significant dates. This time, the drill marked the 85th anniversary of the creation of the North Korean army. And of course, Kim Jong-un made himself seen by state media. He saluted his military as he watched the exercises. The next day, the U.S. and South Korea had their own answer. They did their own live fire drills near the North Korean border. The back and forth comes as tensions continue to rise between the North and the U.S. President Donald Trump has gone after North Korea in the last couple of days. He spoke with the United Nations Security Council on Monday.
The status quo in North Korea is also unacceptable. This is a real threat to the world, whether we want to talk about it or not.
A senior analyst at the Brookings Institution told CBS the constant threats could cause a, quote, needless stumble into war.
One pointed message after another from the U.S. and its two allies to Pyongyang. On Wednesday, the South Korean and U.S. militaries held a combined firing drill in Pocheon, about 60 kilometers northeast of Seoul. Pocheon is located near the demilitarized zone that separates the two Koreas. Dozens of tanks, rocket launchers, and fighter jets were seen during the live fire exercises. This was the third one this month, and it came only a day after the DPRK held one of its own. Meanwhile, South Korea also dispatched a frigate and submarine to join maritime training exercise in waters south of the Korean peninsula. It will also acquire two advanced early warning radars called Green Pine to detect ballistic missiles from the north later this year. Heading for the Korean peninsula, the U.S. aircraft carrier strike group Carl Vinson on Thursday was joined by Japan's air self-defense forces for a joint exercise in waters south of Japan. It follows two-day exercises with two Japanese destroyers as the Vinson passed through the Philippine Sea. The U.S. Navy says the two exercises demonstrate the ability of the U.S. and Japan to respond quickly to threats in the region.
Anti-US demonstrations in South Korea turn violent. They're protesting against a controversial US missile defense system, the Terminal High Altitude Area Defense System, or THAAD. Key components were installed in the early hours of Tuesday morning, and already many people want them removed.
The South Korean and United States authorities sneaked THAAD radar and launching equipment into Suseong-ri golf course by trampling on protesting residents. This situation was so unbelievable to me, and so we held this news conference opposing the THAAD installment.
The US says THAAD, which can intercept ballistic missiles, will be an effective deterrent against North Korea's nuclear ambitions. But South Korea's political opposition say there's been no proper consultation and that the country has been marginalized in recent talks. It also says the US's deployment of an aircraft carrier fleet and nuclear submarines to the already volatile region will cause further destabilization.
The U.S. Air Force tested an unarmed intercontinental ballistic missile early Wednesday morning in California. The Minuteman III missiles are tested about 4 times a year. The last one occurred in February. The launches ensure the missiles are still operating properly, and they show off the country's nuclear capabilities. Wednesday's test just so happens to coincide with rising tensions over North Korea's recent missile tests.
It sure looked like an amphibious assault today on the beaches of Southern California as Marines tested the weapons of future warfare.
The first wave in the war of the future could begin with armed robots and drones that deliver bombs and supplies before the boots ever hit the beach. And Corporal Edmund Kennedy is happy to let machines lead the way.
Better to have this thing be the first on the beach than you.
Absolutely, sir. I don't like being shot at, and I don't think any Marine likes being shot at, but if this could take the brunt of the assault, I think that's a great idea.
The combination of Marines and machines is being showcased in a series of simulated amphibious assaults that includes swarming underwater drones surreptitiously mapping out the shoreline. Colonel Dan Sullivan.
Now even a primitive adversary like ISIS is flying UAVs with explosive charges on them.
So the pressure's on.
The pressure's on.
But putting so much faith in autonomous devices raises concerns over hacking.
This is being designed with the cyber threat in mind. That is at the heart of this. And quite frankly, offensive cyber, too. We've got to be able to attack his network while protecting our own.
The first of its kind task force is exploring new inventions like this speedboat that turns into a submarine and a lethal unmanned jet ski. Navy Captain Chris Mercer is co-hosting the event.
This feels a little bit like the Consumer Electronics Show for the Navy and Marines.
Yes, very, very much so, except for in this case, the judges are the Marines and the sailors.
Can a Lance Corporal come up and say, you know, sir, I really don't like this. I think you should change this.
Yes, they already have.
Much of the new equipment is operated by remote control and is almost like playing a video game. Corporal Kennedy agrees.
Did you ever think that you would be able to bring those video gaming skills to the job?
Not in a million years. My mother told me it was a waste of time, but look at me now, Mom.
On Wednesday, Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu called the U.S. missile strike on a Syrian airbase earlier this month a threat to Russian troops and declared that Moscow would take extra measures to protect their soldiers. At a security conference in Moscow, Shoigu restated Russia's view that the strike, which Washington conducted in response to what it said was a deadly chemical weapons attack by Syrian government forces, was a crude violation of international law. U.S. officials said before launching the strike that they had warned Russian forces and no Russian personnel were injured in the attack. However, Shoigu said Washington's action created a threat to the lives of our servicemen who are fighting against terrorism in Syria. Such steps are forcing us to take extra measures to ensure the safety of Russian forces. Shoigu did not specify what those measures would entail.
The U.S. Air Force's newest and most advanced jet landed in Estonia for the first time on Tuesday, amid heightened tensions between Russia and the U.S. On April 25th, 2 F-35As landed at Amari Air Base, a move meant to reinforce the U.S.'s commitment to the defense of NATO allies that border Russia. Estonia, a former Soviet republic, shares an almost 200-mile-long border with Russia. Estonia's Defense Minister Margus Tsahkna said that the arrival of the F-35 sends a very clear message. adding, quote, "The United States is taking the show of unity very seriously." The F-35s are the latest show of what's known as the European Reassurance Initiative, an effort implemented by the Obama administration to ease Eastern European allies after Russia's annexation of Crimea. The aircraft are scheduled to spend several weeks in Europe training with other NATO military aircraft.
Weapons from a NATO member state have ended up in the hands of jihadists in Syria. That's according to an investigation carried out by a Bulgarian journalist.
This is a weapons warehouse reportedly owned by al-Nusra fighters in eastern Aleppo. And when that part of the city was liberated from terrorist control in December, Bulgarian journalist Dilyana Gatensieva saw something she didn't expect to see there.
There were 9 warehouses full of heavy weapons with the country of origin Bulgaria. There were 2 million shells and 4,000 red rockets, which had somehow ended up in the hands of the jihadists.
On a mission to find out how Bulgarian weapons ended up in Syria, Gatensieva not only traced them back to its manufacturer, VMC, she figured out where the weapons were being shipped to before reaching Syria.
My sources told me that there are regular supplies of weapons through Black Sea to Saudi Arabia, so I knew exactly which vessel is carrying the weapons.
According to nautical tracking website marinetraffic.com, Marian Danica is classified as a Hazard A ship, meaning its cargo contained weapons and explosives. And based on satellite data, the vessel travels between Burgas and the Saudi city of Jeddah regularly. Saudi Arabia, a U.S. ally, has long denied providing al-Nusra with any direct assistance. But it does, along with other allies, support the so-called moderate opposition group, the Free Syrian Army. According to Free Syrian Army Commander Malik al-Kardi, the US, UK, France, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar control the distribution of arms amongst different factions of the opposition. He says the FSA's share of the shipment is often minimal, as the weapons end up in the hands of radical groups.
According to an arms monitoring group on Wednesday, Islamic State militants have developed an improvised explosive device that can be launched from rifles or dropped from an aerial drone. The report by Conflict Armament Research claims that the Sunni militant group was promoting the development of own-brand weapons to provide its insurgents with otherwise unavailable armaments. Iraqi forces launched a sweeping U.S.-backed offensive in October to retake the city, Islamic State's last major urban stronghold in Iraq. CAR, which identifies and tracks arms and ammunition in war zones, reported in December that IS had been making weapons on a scale and sophistication matching national military forces.
Construction sites might one day be buzzing with robots. Researchers are developing autonomous construction systems that can assemble or even 3D print any structure imaginable. Their latest success, a robot from MIT that recently achieved the world's largest, fastest 3D print job. It built a 12-foot dome out of insulation foam in just 13 hours using power from only batteries and the sun. Robotic construction has come a long way in recent years. Autonomous drones circle construction sites, giving builders a bird's-eye view of the progress. The semi-automated mason, or SAM, robot can lay up to 1,200 bricks a day. But some robots can even print entire houses in a matter of days, making construction more cost-effective and efficient than relying solely on manpower. But while there is growing concern that robots are removing jobs from the workforce, we're still a long way from becoming fully reliant on robotic construction. Robots still have a hard time moving around and adjusting to a highly varied environment, like a construction site. And 3D printed objects aren't as strong as traditional ones. We haven't proved them in everyday use, let alone in extreme conditions like earthquakes and storms. In the near future, most industry experts expect robots and humans will work together. Robots will handle the monotonous tasks, while humans tackle the tricky stuff.
These Brazilians are demanding more land rights. They say loggers and farmers are intruding on land that is rightfully theirs. Thousands of indigenous people gathered to march to Congress.
There are evangelical representatives who get together with pro-agribusiness representatives to destroy our rights. They want to transform Brazil into a huge granary and put an end to this country's biodiversity.
Some protesters were armed with bows and arrows. Others chose to carry coffins on their backs, symbolizing the number of indigenous people murdered while fighting for their rights. Campaigners say so far this year there have been 13 deaths related to land conflicts in Brazil.
These coffins represent all the indigenous people from our 305 ethnic groups who have died over the past years as a consequence of this evangelical and ruralist influence in politics.
But the protests soon turned violent. Police say they had to use force when protesters were getting too close to the congressional building. Some indigenous protesters say they plan to stay all week. They claim the government is trying to roll back their protections across the Amazon.
Hundreds of French police officers have taken to the streets to call for better protection and working conditions. France has lived under a state of emergency since 2015 following a series of terrorist attacks, and officers demonstrating say they want France's next president to do more for them. We haven't had recognition for the work we do and the risk we face. The risks are there. They've multiplied between the Kouachi case and the Bataclan, etc. And last week, unfortunately, our colleague, this man says. The march comes almost a week after a gunman shot and killed a policeman on the Champs-Élysées boulevard in Paris, the latest in a series of attacks claimed by the Islamic State militant group.
There have been more violent clashes in the Venezuelan capital Caracas as weeks of political turmoil continue. The number of people killed in the past few weeks has now reached 29. Opponents of the Venezuelan government have been taken to the streets over what they see as anti-democratic policies of the administration of Nicolas Maduro. They're now calling for an immediate presidential election. More than 400 people have been injured and nearly 1,300 detained.
Deadly storms dumped more than 8 inches of rain on the city of Raleigh, the capital of North Carolina. Swollen rivers caused some of the worst flooding since Hurricane Matthew.
Torrential rain across central North Carolina sent creeks over their banks on Tuesday, triggering major flooding across the region. Water surrounded entire neighborhoods, and rescuers had to use rafts to help people and pets get to safety.
I got ready for work and got out, and then they called and said we had to evacuate.
Dozens of roads quickly became impassable, and drivers were ordered onto detours. Those who risked navigating the flooded streets became stranded.
I see an incredible sight. It really is terrifying, the power of something like that.
All right, here's our local school buses going across the washed out road.
A Brunswick County school bus driver was fired after driving through a flooded road that had been closed to traffic.
This is a genius.
Front lawns and backyards across the Carolinas were submerged, leaving some homeowners feeling helpless.
Never seen it like that before. I think a lot of water just converges all in one place at one time, and there's no place for it to go here.
Some residents are dismayed by these latest floods. They say they're still fixing all the damage left by Hurricane Matthew just 6 months ago.
Just overwhelming. I mean, it's home and there's nothing we can do about it. I mean, just hope for the best and pray.
Police officers in upstate New York pitched in to help a man who they say is down on his luck. The Rome Police Department says the man named Bobby was hanging out in the city's downtown area when he ran into Officer Aaron Page. Bobby told the officer how much he wanted a hot shower and a haircut. Officer Page could see he was in need, so he told him to come to the precinct the next day. Some other kind cops were also there waiting to help Bobby. They gave him a place to shower and some clean clothes to put on after. Then they gave him a much-needed haircut and a shave. They say Bobby couldn't thank the officers enough for helping him look and feel like a new man.